Okay, round two. This video is going to be a quick lightning round demonstration of how to use my render demo to get a model onto the Saturn in high resolution 3D. I'm not going to explain very much here. I'm just going to show you how to do it at the most basic level. First, we need to download GeoEngine. Do that by here, typing in GeoEngine. You click download, or you can just go to the website here. You can get the zip, or you can get it from the GitHub. That's fine. Speaking of GitHub, we're going to go ahead and type in, it's going to say github.com. And it autofilled for me, so let's go back to Google. GitHub. Go to the main page. Since you're not logged in, this is probably where it's going to go. Type in here, you type in my username, which is PONUT6. Then under users here in the bottom left, here I am. This is the one that you want. Click it. If you've never used GitHub before and don't know how to use this, to download things, you hit code, download zip. There. Okay, and I've already done these two things, so I don't have to sit around on the video because my internet is very slow. Now we can close this. Okay. So first off, we need to extract GeoEngine here, so we'll move that up to the downloads folder. You can put it anywhere you want. Just wait for this to happen. Okay, and then before we do anything else, we're going to take this folder, we're going to copy it, and we're going to go here to the GeoEngine's projects folder, paste. That's going to unzip, put it here, open this. Now don't do anything else yet. Copy these two folders. This is inside the GeoEngine modifications folder. You copy those two. And you go back to the root folder of GeoEngine, and then you paste. It'll ask you to replace a whole bunch of files. We want to replace them. Okay? Open projects, and now ready to right click and open, or just double click on compile here. It'll give you this warning. Don't worry, it's not a virus, I promise. And anyway, now this will quickly compile the project. So it has everything it needs to run as is. Now, you can use any emulator shortcut you want. I'm just going to run it with SSF right now. Again, it's going to be the warning. That's okay. Anyway. It'll take a bit to load. Particularly because I'm recording. It slows down my hard drive. Okay? Here it is. Now, I've sized the window pretty small, but trust me, it's running in high resolution. It also has sound. So that should be that. I don't know what the controls are because this is a new SSF installation, so it's kind of weird. For me, anyway. But we can go ahead and close this. Now, we're going to go ahead and run clean. Again, it's going to warn you, but this is clean.bat. It's just going to purge everything. So we're starting clean again. Now, in the CD directory, we have all the files, and Sphere right here, that's the file that the game is loading. So you can either put a new model file in here with the same name, but we'll get to that later. For now, we're going to go to the converter directory, to the in. This is where you're going to put your .obj files. So let's open Blender now. Let me size it to fit the recording. What I did earlier. Okay. And we're just going to make a thing. We're just going to modify this. Let's see. Loop it. All right. Again, You'll notice this is an old version of Blender. However you're gonna make this model, it doesn't necessarily matter too much, but I will at least show you a few things about making the model before I say it's good enough. And we'll do this. And we'll extrude a flat edge just to, I don't know, do it. Okay. One thing you will want to do is make the origin the bound center. Kind of strange because that's not where the bound center is. What are you doing? Origin to geometry, bound center. Not required, but it helps. So now we're going to go File, Export. Again, whatever version of Blender you're using, I assume you already know how to do this stuff, but we're just demonstration purposes. Now we're going to navigate to that directory. System bookmark should be way more than that. Huh. Downloads. We're going to export this to the in directory. We're going to say selection only. Now I'm just going to overwrite sphere. I don't have to change any code yet. We're just going to overwrite sphere. Export. Notice I didn't add any materials. I didn't do anything like that yet. We can ignore that for now. And now we had this converted directory open already. I'm going to run this called dvp_compiler. This is just a modified version of the GTP compiler, but this is modified from an old version, so it doesn't work the same way. It's going to give you the warning again. I promise it's not a virus. Security scan required? Oh no. It worked just fine. So for animation, we're not going to do that today. Just hit 0. That's how you skip it. And say in slash. You have to put the slash. And then we're going to take sphere. S-P-H-E-R. And it's going to give you information. Here. I'm not going to spend too much time explaining this, but when you're using high resolution graphics on the Saturn, so anything beyond, anytime the screen width is more than 352, your frame buffer is going to be 8 bits per pixel, which means you only have 256 possible colors. That also means you can't use RGB color on VDP1. That's the best explanation I can give in less than a minute. Because of that, all textures are indexed color. See here, it says palette file initialization. We'll talk about the palette either in a different video or you can just ask me on Discord, but for now, understand that your textures are going to be converted indexed color by this tool. Okay. Yeah, okay. So it made the thing. I don't even think it gave it a texture. But we'll find out what happens when you don't give it a texture. So in the out folder, it made a new file called sphere.dvp. It can be capitalized underscore. Right now, that doesn't matter. We're going to go back to the CD directory, which is the actual CD, what goes to the CD that you would put in the Saturn. We're going to paste the new sphere in and compile once more. Now, when you run it via SSF, it should be there. You can also run it in Yaboo's. I don't recommend it, but you can. Here, and it's not there. That's because you didn't give it a texture. If you don't give it a texture, a material name, it won't even try and generate one. So be sure you do that. So we're going to open Blender back up. Just hit material. Now it has a material. I'm going to export it again. Overwrite that one. Don't close it. We're going to go back to the converter. Repeat the same process. 0 in spur. So now it gives you texture information. It says couldn't load material.tg. That's fine. It will generate a bad texture. Then this gives you information about what it's doing with the textures. So I'll show you the pre-processing later. But for now, it has a texture now. If you don't see that information there, a whole list of what the textures are and stuff, that means it's not going to work because it didn't find any. Just pasting it back to the CD as usual. Then we compile again without cleaning. That's fine. Okay, this time I'm going to run it with Metafin just so I know where the buttons are. And we should see our model. There it is. That's what the bad texture looks like with the palette that we have set. So again, index color stuff is kind of weird, but there it is. Now we can do a quick demonstration with what the demo can do. If you press the start button, you'll open the menu. Here you can either control the player or control the entity. So now the D-pad buttons are controlling the entity, which is not going to move the camera. So I can move it over there. And what we just saw was back face culling. That thing on the bottom, it's a single plane. I haven't told it that it's a dual plane. So if we look behind it, it's not there. It's back face culled. You'll also notice that there is some lighting. It's basic lighting, very basic, but it is there. That's because if I go back to controlling the player, there's an empty object right there. That is the position of the light. What I can do, I'm going to look back at the object here for a second. Menu, I'm going to go to snap light option. We'll snap the light to where I currently am, where the camera is basically. And you notice the lighting changed. Okay. Here for toggle light, we can either turn the light to bright or darken. So this is an option. So if you want an area to be darker, as in it's in shade, turn this on for the light source, which will make it, what's near it dark. Okay, again, this also has a collision library. So if I turn that on, it won't let me go through the object because the player, will collide with it. Or I can just turn that off as it is by default. I can go through it just fine. Now the collision library also works. Roll the object and push it into you. It doesn't let it go into you either. Okay. Basic demonstration of how to do this. Now we're going to go just one step more advanced. And I'm going to show you how to give pre-processing to parts of the mesh. So it'll be a little difficult with this tiny of a window. So I'm going to expand this part here. Press and to make it go away. I'm going to add another material. I'm just going to call this one MAT. This is MAT0. No, MAT1, MAT0. That's fine. Okay, so for MAT0, this is going to be our normal texture. We're just going to give it a color so we know which one it is. MAT1, we're going to say that's dual plane. That's something we can see from either in front of it or behind it. You have to name the material in Blender or whatever other tool you're using to make this file. You have to name it with a pre-processing as dual underscore MAT1. Okay, and we're going to edit the mesh, apply that to that plane there. Now there are other pre-processing things that we can do as well. So I'm going to root another face here. So we're going to do mesh for one and one. These are all going to be the same texture in the end. Make that one mesh. Give it another color just so we know what it is. Now the colors you assign here in Blender or whatever texture software or whatever software you're using, they have no bearing on what's going to be on the Saturn. We handle that in a completely different way how you do other models meshes. Okay, so we have dual, we have mesh, we also have another one called medu underscore texture name. Medu is both mesh and dual plane. And I'm just going to give that a color so I know which one it is. That one there. Now, these here on the front, two of them, I'm going to give another preprocessor called dark. 4 letters, dark underscore MAT1. Right. I think there are more preprocessing options, but dark, you're going to see what that does in a minute. For now, we're just going to export this once more. Going to overwrite fur. We're not even changing any code right now. We're just overwriting the same file. Go back to the converter. Open it. Arrow in fur. Oops. If you do something wrong with the converter, it will just crash. It will just close itself. That's fine. Now, you'll see here, you'll pick up on the preprocessor you've given it. So it knows it has one normal texture, one mesh texture, one dual plane texture, one mesh and dual plane texture, and one dark texture. It doesn't tell you the number of polygons that have these textures, but it does tell you they exist. And again, it's fine if it can't find the texture file. It'll just create a bad texture. We're going to take this file here, we're going to copy that back, put it on the CD, paste. Then we're going to go ahead and compile again to rebuild the CD so our new file is on the CD again. And I'm going to run it in Medifin. You can press start to speed up the boot sequence if you didn't know. You can do that on a real Saturn as well. And we see it here. Okay, so you can see clearly the mesh textures. I'm going to just control the entity here. The dark texture, so that enables something called MSB shadow. As you can see, in high resolution, that's doing some weird stuff. The emulator actually may not be correct here, but yeah, that looks really interesting, doesn't it? That pattern that it's writing to the screen has nothing to do with the texture right now. It's just writing a fixed bit pattern to everything in that area. So it wouldn't matter what texture we have, it's going to look exactly like that. However, you'll notice it's transparent with the mesh texture. Even though it should be backface cold right now, it's still showing up, which is interesting. So that's just kind of how the Saturn handles it, but also that's how my game engine's handling it here. But you notice the dual plane textures, now you can see them on both sides. That should cover it. So if you just wanted to know how to get a mesh on Saturn in high resolution, this basically covers how to do that. It also covers what happens when you put MSB shadow in. This is what Medifin thinks happens. Clear. I'm going to show you the differences in emulators now that we're past the main thing of the video. I can show you more things that aren't necessarily important for what we're doing. So I'm going to launch this with Yapaoos. You're going to notice Yapaoos will open, please. Open door. Door stuck. Okay. You'll notice Yapaoos thinks something completely different happens with the textures we've set to dark. It doesn't seem to care. It thinks that they're no different than anything else. Which is incorrect, but that's what it thinks. Doesn't seem to think they're any different. We're going to close that. We're going to open SSF, and you're going to see it do something yet even more different. Okay. Which button goes forward, please, game? SSF, please. Please. There we go. There we go. SSF thinks it put the solid color there. Which it does do the transparency, which is correct, but it's writing a solid color. So let me tell you though, what is it actually going to do? What I can tell you is in the frame buffer, it's going to write 0, and then it's going to keep whatever was in the frame buffer on the next pixel. So 0, pixel, frame buffer doesn't change, 0, frame buffer doesn't change. I believe this purple is something that's in the palette. So VDP2, yeah, well, you can test that on real hard for yourself. If I'm going to tell you what I expected to happen is black, empty, black, empty, black, empty. But you'll notice the fun thing is in high resolution mode, emulators don't really know what to do. So you're going to have fun if you try and test this. Okay. Now, textures. And I'm just going to clean that. We're going to go to the converter. And in this folder, we're just going to make some textures just to demonstrate how to do that. Again, we have two texture names in this image. We have MAT0 and MAT1. I'm just going to say new. Actually, you know what? Let's open paint.net. Paint.net is what I use. And canvas size, we're going to go really small, 16 by 16. If you don't know, if you're unfamiliar, on Saturn, your texture width has to be divisible by 8. But your texture height can be anything you want as long as it's not huge. Huge being greater than 256. I'm saying 256. I know it's 512. Don't go more than 256. Anyway. A basic texture. Let's see. Give it a couple colors. Really gaudy and weird. That. This. This in here too. That. Alright, it looks like vomit. And make it even more vomity. And blur it. X. Blurs here. Oh yeah, now that looks like some hot vomit. Okay. Okay, save as. We're good. We're not in the right folder. We go to downloads here. Converter in. This is going to be mat0.tga. Save. Now here, do not compress. Do not compress. Make sure it's 24-bit. Save. Okay? Now we're just going to modify this a bit by putting a character in it. So T. Title T. We're going to make that character bright white. Really bright white or black. Black. We'll do black. Just for fun. This is going to be saved as mat1.tga. Okay. Let's paint now. We're not gonna, actually we have to. No, we don't. We don't have to export that again. So we can open this 0 in for. You'll notice here it's converting an RGB texture because it found the palette. If it can't find the palette, you actually can use indexed color textures. I'm not going to show you how to do that here, but you can actually use indexed color TGAs. Converter knows how to deal with that. But if you want to use RGB, you're going to have a palette file. I'm not going to cover the palette file here. You can ask me about it later. But for now, so because we only had 2 texture names in total, again, what I'm trying to explain here is even if you say you give it a preprocessor like mesh, medu, or dark, or dual, it'll skip that, and what you put after the underscore is going to be the texture name, going to be the file name. But it still loads the texture every time you specify a new material. Okay, go ahead and close that. Now we have a new sphere, which is bigger in file size because it has more stuff in it. We're going to paste that on the CD. I'm going to compile it. Now we're going to see some weird stuff going on with the textures because they've all been converted to index color to a palette that most certainly doesn't have all the colors that I put in the texture. Okay, it does still look like vomit though, so that's cool. Now, what I do want to show you here is all of the textures are oriented such that there's a consistent direction. Now it can't quite do this for triangles, but for any quad, it's going to know how to do it. It's going to be able to orient things to where there's an up. Okay. That should about cover us.